Hello, and welcome to this episode of Security Square, our security-focused series where we feature analyst insight, expert guests, and cover some of the latest news and happenings in the security sector. I'm your host, Shelly Kramer, Principal Analyst here at Kramer&Co. And my guest today is Alfred Huger, who's the co-founder and CPO at Command-Zero. Alfred and I are going to talk about building the SOC of the future and why achieving harmony between human analysts and AI agents is important. Alfred, welcome. I'm so glad to have you.
Thanks for having me, Shelly.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Well, before we dive in and to set the stage a little bit, I think it's safe to say that security operations centers are undergoing a major transformation today as organizations work to leverage AI to help protect themselves from sophisticated threats and also to establish and maintain operational and business continuity if and when an attack happens. A modern SOC is different than what we've seen in the past, and today's SOC requires the right blend of technology, talent, and strategic vision to effectively defend against evolving cyber threats. But the challenge isn't about just implementing AI, it's about understanding how automation and budget constraints and workforce evolution are fundamentally reshaping security operations. How do analysts build careers when AI handles routine tasks? What's the practical approach to AI adoption without disrupting core security functions? That's what we're going to explore today, and that's why I'm thrilled to have Alfred here with me today. We're going to dive deep into the SOC of the future and explore some real-world implementation strategies. We're going to chat about the future of SOC operations in this AGI, and we're also going to talk about the role of security analysts. So, Alfred, you ready to dig in?
I'm ready to go.
I love it. Okay, I always ask my guests to share with me a little bit about their career backstory, their career journey, so have at it.
Well, I wish I had you and I spoke earlier about a very interesting case you'd had previously. I'm not going to top that. But my background, I started in cyber longer ago than I would like to admit. But originally, I started as a practitioner for a video game company, Nintendo, actually, many years ago. But I transitioned into building products because the sorts of products I wanted to use as a practitioner weren't available to me. So in the late 90s, I started founding startups, and I built and sold a number of them to companies like Symantec and McAfee and SourceFire and Cisco and others. And along the way, I've built things like SOC automation platforms and endpoint detection and response technologies, firewalls, a whole litany of technologies. And now I'm here at Command-Zero with a focus on building platforms that help analysts perform investigations in complex environments.
So basically, you've been a slacker.
Yeah, for a long time. And I had a full head of hair when I started, but things have changed.
Well, I'm team bald men, so I think you're doing just fine. So,
Right.
okay, let's dive in here. Share with me, if you would, Alfred, your thoughts on the forces that are shaping the transformation of today's security operations centers.
Yeah, well, so a lot of these forces are the ones that we've been in contention with for time immemorial. It's high volumes of alert data. You have analysts that are being overwhelmed by
Right,
far too much signal in order to chase through to the things that actually matter to them. Means
right.
navigating through miles of content. That's not a new problem. It's getting a lot worse. As the threat landscape expands, if you forget about even discussing AI, the number of platforms that your average enterprise adopts, whether they're SaaS platforms or otherwise, on a daily basis becomes mind-numbing. But,
Right.
but an analyst sees all of that as exposure. They're getting alerts from that entire environment, and they've got to navigate through it. And then there's the extreme shortage in skilled staff. So for every single one of those new platforms that I have to introduce and all the training that comes with it, I now need to have analysts that are available that can pick up that work. And there's an endemic shortage.
Right.
So it's volume, it's an extreme shortage of staff and availability of those people, and then you add AI to the mix as well. So that's a problem in addition.
So let's talk though about the career progression for analysts. The
Yeah.
age of AI is shaking things up. And I happened to see recently a cybersecurity startup that basically replaces your CISO with
Mm,
AI, and
mhm.
I thought, okay, sure, and
Yeah.
So I think that, there is a very real concern in the industry about AI replacing certain roles, certain
Yeah,
jobs.
there
And,
is.
and sometimes we don't, sometimes those of us in the industry, I think that, if I hear the line, and I've said this line, somebody's, AI isn't going to replace your job. Somebody who knows how to use AI is going to replace your job. That's really kind of BS, because the
Yeah.
reality of it is, AI is going to replace some jobs. But let's talk about
Mhm.
that from a security analyst standpoint. How do you see the career progression for security analysts in this age of AI, when we have outsourced SOCs and we have tightening budgets and we have this skills shortage? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, and it's a complex topic, that one. And I tend to agree with you, by the way. It's absolutely going to replace jobs. It's just a question of which jobs, or maybe just functions
Yeah,
within jobs. But
yeah,
I mentioned earlier that there's one of the new things we're adding to the mix is AI, and that means a couple of things from an analyst perspective. It is not only do they have to contend with human beings, but they almost certainly have to contend with AI now on the other end of the spectrum. And
right,
from their job perspective, they now have to learn how to leverage AI in order to be able to use it more effectively in their environment to help them get on top of the problems they already have and the problems they're about to face. Because if,
right.
if you're an analyst operating in an environment and you're used to responding to human beings on the other end of the attack chain, you're going to need to advance that thinking and understand that you're facing machines. They think faster than you do.
Right,
Generally speaking, they're much better at correlating information and making decisions at speed
right.
than you
Yeah.
are.
Seeing patterns.
Same patterns. Yeah, that's what they're
Yeah,
built for. And if you're not on the other end with that level of assistance, then it's going to be a really bad day for you and the company you work for at some point. And I don't think that's hyperbole.
I
I,
don't
I
either.
think that's just common sense at
Yeah.
some point. So the world's changing for those analysts a great deal, both from the adversary that they have to face and also from the tools they now have to learn to leverage to face that adversary.
Yeah. And, I think that, an important part of this conversation is that, in the last couple of years, certainly with the advent of Gen AI, AI dominates every conversation, right?
Yeah,
Across every industry, and certainly the security industry is no different. But the reality of it is that, as excited as we are collectively about embracing and utilizing and leveraging AI in what it is we're doing for productivity and efficiency and cost savings, and all of those sorts of things, reducing alert fatigue, all of those wonderful things, threat actors are equally as excited about using
100%.
AI, because
Hmm.
that helps them do their jobs better and more
Hmm.
effectively. And
Yep.
it used to be much easier to identify, a phishing attempt or something like that, simply because sometimes their things just weren't quite right.
Right.
The language
Yeah.
was just quite off. But AI is helping them up their game as well. So I do think this is a race, and I don't know that anybody necessarily wins, but you have to be using and leveraging AI now and quickly and proficiently, because the threat actors certainly are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
So
we work in an industry that's always been sort of defined by its asymmetry, in that,
yeah.
the defender has to be right every time. The attacker only has to be right once.
Right.
And they're early adopters,
Yeah.
and they don't have regulatory compliance issues. They don't have budgetary constraints.
No.
And so the advantage when any new technology comes into play usually goes to the attacker initially.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know that we have time this time for that to be the case. So
No.
it's definitely something that requires a lot of inspection early from
Yeah.
enterprises, even if there's a great discomfort level with adoption, because
Yeah.
the price of non-engagement is pretty substantial.
It's very high. Yes, it is very, very high. So, Alfred, given your work in the field and what I know are countless conversations that you have with customers and prospects and other industry leaders, what do you see as some of the major challenges for CISOs and SOC leaders as they look to adopt AI?
There's and this depends a little bit on the audience, for which challenges are going to come into play. From a SOC leader's perspective, they have to be really concerned about their sunk cost inside of relative to what they have built already. How much do they get to retain moving into an environment where they're talking about SOC automation? Meaning, are they going to be able to leverage the investment that they've already made in products and tooling and process and all of those things? The answer almost certainly has to be yes, because the idea of a complete rip and replace of your entire infrastructure on unproven technology is a bit nauseating for anyone to sort
Right.
of consider, I think. But that's one of the things they have to be able to navigate. And I think also from a CISO's perspective, they also have to be concerned about internal pushback. Those fears that you mentioned earlier, Shelly, about job displacement's a real
Yeah,
fear, and it should be in the SOC because that is a real
absolutely.
place that you could see it happen.
Yeah,
So there will be the same people that are usually expected to evaluate new technologies are the same people whose jobs are at risk. So navigating that is going to have to be very thoughtful, I think, for
yeah,
CISOs. And from the practitioner side, so those people who are evaluating these technologies, they should be looking at this as a way to elevate their capability and a way to become more valuable in their organization, which there's no doubt about it. I mean, having seen this deployed many, many times now, agentic technology, Gen AI or LLM driven technology can turn every analyst into a superstar and can usually take everyone off the bench and into the game. People who were
right.
not able to contribute at certain levels before find they're able to do that now. That's the power of AI for these team members. They need to embrace,
Yeah,
um, because pushing back on these sorts of acquisitions into their environment puts the organization they work for at risk ultimately, and
right.
it stifles their careers because the next place they go to work is going to ask them in that interview process, what are you capable of doing with Gen AI to further the security mission? And if the answer is nothing, those will be
Right.
your career prospects. Nothing.
100%. I mean, and I think that proficiency with AI and being innately curious and, wanting to consumed with a desire to experiment and learn, and all of those things, that's your competitive differentiator in the job market
Absolutely.
today. And I don't care if you're in security and SOC operations
Yeah.
or marketing or HR. I mean, that's the differentiator because across the board, what I hear from industry leaders is we don't have those skill sets, people with those skill sets internally. We desperately need them. And so I think that, I mean, would be leaning into that like crazy.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. So do you see, I mean, I know the answer to this question. What I want to touch on is the evolution of the SOC and the role of the analyst over the next handful of years. I mean, I think we're going to see a really pretty rapid evolution. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think the SOC flattens a great deal. You mentioned repetitive tasks earlier, and I think that those are what AI is really well suited to
Right,
evaporate in your
right,
environment. So I think that when you take a lot of that manual repeat, rinse, and continue sort of effort out of an environment, your staffing requirements, they don't necessarily narrow because it's not like you're ever overstaffed in cyber. But what they do allow you to do is refocus your efforts in areas of your program that really need human level interaction. Put the rest of that
right.
automation to bed. I think that you're going to see a lot of the promise that was originally offered by SOAR products, things that were process automation based that we all thought would get solved with the advent of SOAR 10 years ago. I think they're
Right.
going to get solved now. I think by and large, those things will become table stakes and they'll
Yeah.
get removed from the plate, which is very valuable to everybody. But
Yeah.
I think you see analysts will more likely become people who help guide workflows, who educate agents inside of an environment, act as orchestrators, check the work, become the human in the loop,
Right.
in order to stage gate decisions that may or may not be made by agents. But I think every team will see themselves augmented by agent-based technology or Gen AI-based technology,
Yeah.
sort of writ large, and they'll become traffic cops, arbiters, decision makers,
Yeah.
rather than people who are being employed to do effectively really repetitive, low-grade tasks.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I mean, I think that's tremendously exciting.
I
You
do
know what
too.
I'm saying? And I just think that, and yet I also, I mean, I'm deeply connected in this industry, and I hear people talking about their career fears and what's
Yeah.
ahead on the AI front. And every day, the news headlines are, I think Microsoft just announced they're laying off 6,000 more people today, and blah
Yeah.
blah blah, right? And so
Yeah.
AI is marching forward, but this is not something that, this is not something to dread. This is something that it's inevitable. It's happening whether we like it or not. And I
Yeah.
happen to like it. I know that you like it. And
Yeah.
we see the potential here and the business benefits. And it's like lean all the way in. right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Be that person within your organization who knows more about this than anybody else, who's an internal champion, who can work with other departments, all of that sort of thing. I mean, to me, that's an exciting, avenue on the career front.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that the human curiosity still comes at a premium. It's extremely valuable. So
Yeah,
demonstrate it
yeah,
and step into your role. Find places where large language models can help you be more effective in your role and leverage Gen AI.
yeah,
Because it's inexorable, as you said. Like this
yeah,
is the reality, and it's
yeah,
coming down on us, whether we prefer to participate in it or not. The question is,
right.
to what degree are we going to do so? Analysts aren't getting replaced in the near term. They're
No,
everybody's understaffed as it is. If you consider that our industry is short hundreds of thousands of roles, if not millions,
right.
this maybe helps us get to a place where we're on a little more of a level playing field with the attacker.
Yeah,
But this is a job title that will never go out of style. It will always have a role in security as long as there's things to be stolen, things to protect, nation states in play. There's always going to be a place for strong analysts, and
right.
this I think is liberating. You
Yeah.
stop doing those tasks that were nauseatingly boring before,
Oh, yeah,
and start
absolutely.
applying, intellectual curiosity.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing that's really cool, about the role of, SOC analysts in general and developers and IT team members. I mean, this is a sweeping generalization, but in general, I believe that this group of people are a group of people who are curious and problem solvers
Yep.
and like figuring out the answer to the puzzle,
Yeah.
and so I think that sets them up exceptionally well to really flourish in this age of AI.
I think that's a career defining sort of characteristic of almost everybody I've met in
Yeah,
cyber is that
yeah,
intellectual curiosity. And for
yeah.
young analysts coming into this role or anybody who's choosing to move into this space, today, I don't think anybody thought, man, I'm going to go to school so I can sit and review mind-numbingly boring alerts all day long. Like that isn't
Right,
what they became a cybersecurity professional for.
right.
This technology helps that become something that's in the rear view for them, so they can focus on dealing directly with adversaries,
Yeah,
attack mapping, figuring out how people think and are moving inside of an environment. Those are the really sexy, exciting things about cyber. I think that AI removes a lot of the drudgery, so those will be the core things that are left for us,
yeah.
and that's good for everybody, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the business benefits for early adopters of AI in the SOC.
Yeah,
I'm thinking, is there any chance you came today with any stats or anecdotal
sure.
feedback that you might have that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think that So I'll have to be credible. This is an early space, so
Yeah,
the numbers
it
I give
is.
you are what we see with customers now. But I think it's table stakes would be to expect your ability to triage cases jumping forward something like by 70% in terms of time, if not more. Meaning, like, that's reduced time to get to a place where you're able to do something intelligent with an escalation, or with an alert. So act on it.
Okay.
Mean time to contain, mean time to remediate, whatever it is that you're tracking inside your org. There will be, and there are, substantial drops in that. And it's 70+% faster time to triage. That should be dropped from hours to minutes in most cases. There are things that are a little less easy to measure, but I think are as important. Consistency. So your organization does not have analysts that are all at exactly the same skill level. It probably has a very small number
Sure.
of analysts that take all the hardest cases because they have time in seat. They have perhaps a little more experience coming into the job.
Right.
It could just be they're really good at the job. Um, AI helps level that up. So this brings consistency. Look, machines don't forget steps. They're better at reporting. They're better at detailed analysis, and they can build things that are auditable, and they can produce work that looks just like best practices every time, particularly with a little bit of coaching. So I think that's a big advantage that you see that's maybe a little harder to metric, but there's also the lower ramp up time. So
Yeah.
these systems can get junior analysts who were those people that were previously consigned to reviewing alerts up and into the game probably within a week,
Right.
actually participating, providing high quality investigations in more complex topics than they would have been available to do before,
Yeah.
which is very powerful for every team.
Well,
So there's
and
and
that's
there's
a
things of
huge
that.
there's a huge business bottom line business benefit there.
There absolutely is. Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's like we're all constrained around hiring and OpEx in every environment. And the more you can operationalize the people that you have to get high quality, consistent outputs, it allows you to be able to refine that OpEx and apply it in areas of your program that need extension versus always being forced to hire and hire and hire more for the same tasks. This should change that operating model over time for CISOs. If not this year, certainly next year, I think we'll start to see that come into effect.
Yeah, I think so too. So for somebody listening to our conversation and thinking about, implementing AI in the SOC, what steps do you recommend for, let's call it a crawl, walk, run approach to that?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the right approach, particularly when we're dealing with environments where you don't want to introduce more risk with change. I think you have to start by codifying, known good logic. You treat your AI like a junior analyst, and be able to measure and metric their work. But start assuming that all of your simple cases and all of your alert-based cases should be handled by AI, and that work should be something that your team then, human in the loop, reviews and approves and moves on to the next stage. Start there. And then move to things that are more complex, like taking your existing investment, specifically with SIM, which plays such a huge role in environments, and embedding that into these AI systems. Ensure that they can use the best tooling and all the practices that you've spent years developing into their platforms, and slowly graduate your way up until you have that AI participating in simple investigations, complex investigations, operating directly with your SIM, so on and so forth, and just one step at a time. Measure, and then execute, and move forward. And I think that if you take that particular approach, it's a safe, thoughtful way of involving both the level of benefit you get from AI, but also being able to control it, and measure it for its efficacy, and control its cost, because it's not free. There's a price associated with it. But that would be my suggestion, and that's what we've seen work in enterprises today. I think people are on this journey. No one, to my knowledge, has really gotten to the end point. Yeah, we don't even know where that is, considering how fast this stuff's moving.
Well, and the reality of it is, in our world today, Alfred, the endpoint's always changing.
Yeah, that's true. The goalposts are always being moved in this.
Yeah, we're never done. We're just continually evolving. I am always so grateful. I do believe that from a sort of personality and character trait standpoint, we kind of are wired in such a way that we kind of get what we get. Some people are anxious. Some people are not. Some people love change. Some people don't. I happen to love change. I've always loved change. And it's funny because it drives my husband crazy. It's like, why can't we always do the same thing? Why can't we always buy the same thing? Why are you always changing? But, it's like, and I'm always been grateful because I've been a change agent in every bit of the work that I've done over my whole career. I love learning, all that sort of thing. So I think that really, when you're thinking about whether you're, coming into a career right out of college, or whether you're in a role right now and you're thinking about the impact of AI on that, I think, learn to love change.
Yeah.
That can make a huge difference. So one of the things that we haven't talked much about, Alfred, and is Command Zero. So tell me, if you would, sort of what led you to found this company and what it is you and your team are most focused on.
So I'll start with the last part first. We're focused on taking last mile investigations, and driving them to a conclusion. What last mile means for us is that somebody somewhere couldn't solve a case. Maybe that's from an alert, like we talked about. Maybe it's a HR-led investigation. It's a thing that an analyst has to drive to a conclusion to really truly understand, so they can do something about it. That's where we focus, and we leverage Gen AI, obviously, very heavily in that. And we've built a platform that has an agentic subsystem that helps analysts take investigations the subsystem is completed for them, so they can human in the loop and make references and decisions based off of it. But we also use that exact same platform to allow human analysts to drive complex investigations and pull in agents to help them where they need it. So they can do things like report building and correlation and pattern matching and recognition, things that humans aren't great at. Because we want to build a platform that both agents could leverage and humans could leverage in one place. And that's been our focus. And what took us here is most of us were former practitioners, but all of us have spent time building things like SOC platforms. A good part of my life earlier in my career was building SOC platforms for companies. And then building, all the technology that they leverage. I worked on EDR and firewalls. All of these are part of the SOC world. So all of us have been exposed to watching what's effectively a train wreck happened for quite a long time in the SOC. All the issues you and I spoke about earlier, being overwhelmed, being fatigued, being asymmetric. And we wanted to build a platform that could help with at least the part of it that we thought was most pressing, which is, hey, look, you maybe knocked down those 5,000 cases earlier, but let's focus on the 50 that might put you on the front page of the New York Times and get those done right. And so that's where we focused.
That makes sense. As we wrap this episode, Alfred, I'd love to ask you to leave us with one piece of advice for security leaders. And whether it's security leaders thinking about AI in the SOC, thinking about what they should prioritize today, thinking just understanding that their world is in a state of upheaval today, right?
Yeah.
And also, I would say that, I just can't even imagine. And I am a very low stress person, and I don't get crazed by a lot of things, but I cannot imagine truly the stress of being a security leader, a CISO today. I mean, it's a really, really tough job for so many reasons. So leave us with one piece of advice for security leaders, whether it's they're thinking about AI for SOC or just in general in this age of AI. What's your best words of advice for them?
It's such a complicated question to really answer intelligently. But I would say this, based on my exposure, is believe it. There's a great deal of skepticism in our space, in part because the security industry markets way over its skis. We're terrible for it. And in this case, though, this isn't a boy who cried wolf. You are already being exposed to AI in your world. The question is, are you going to only be exposed by attackers, which you certainly are right now? Probably most phishing attempts you see are being driven through large language models. Social engineering is, exploit development is. Whether you're going to take that exposure only from the attacker, or whether you're going to get on board and figure out how you fit this in your environment to help you deal with that problem, because that's real and it's now. So it is believe and get in front of it. This isn't a case where the industry's crying wolf. This is the wolf's at the door. So it's time to do something about it.
Right there with you on that one. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of Security Square. I'm your host, Shelly Kramer, Principal Analyst at Kramer&Co. And thanks again to my guest, Alfred Huger, co-founder and CPO at Command Zero, for joining me today for this conversation on building a SOC for the future and so many other things about the security space today. I knew it would be a great conversation, and Alfred, you did not disappoint. So thank you again for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, to our listeners and viewers, this is your reminder that if you've enjoyed what you see here, hit that subscribe button now. We'll see you back here next time for the next episode of Security Square.